Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to Part 2 Season 3 of What If Deku Was a Nomu. That's right, we're in series finale territory now, everybody. So sit back, relax, and get ready. You're in for a treat. So, we begin. Mirio and Taya manage to dodge the giant's burst of speed and save themselves from the harsh fate of being crushed. The beastmen glared at them both with incalculable hatred. On the giant's shoulders, Wolfram and Kirigiri awaited their master's orders. I have been patient for too long. My plans have been utterly dashed. The seeds I've sown, the blood and resources, wasted by a brat and a traitor. I've had to take this large body instead of the one I've cultivated. And for that I will burn your world to the ground. The giant lifted his fist in the air, tensed them, then slammed them into the ground, sending out shockwaves, which turned into earthquakes. Heroes and villains were sent flying, or buried alive. Only those who could fly and were strong enough to save themselves were spared. The dust and debris kicked up in the air formed a cloud of haze that covered miles, veiling those within it, blinding the helicopters above. Kirigiri, be the end to all those that follow my detractor, and you, Wolfram, make sure no hero leaves this place alive. I want no survivors. This is no longer a battlefield, but mass entombment for those foolish enough to act against me. Wolfram cracked a wicked grin while Kirigiri gave a simple bow. Wolfram summoned as much metal to him as possible before activating the quirk-amplifying device he'd recently stolen. With a press of a button, his muscles expanded and his quirk grew in power. He created bullets out of the metal he manipulated and fired aimlessly into the cloud. Kirigiri's body expanded and took the shape of a black hole, after which the cloud villain began to suck anyone unfortunate enough to be in his path. The screams of hero and villain alike filled the air well after the cloud of destruction faded. It was a living nightmare for most, who were powerless to defend themselves, while those who could had come to a non-verbal agreement and took action. Gene fiber began to wrap around Wolfram, as a beaten-up best genist became visible as the dust settled. Glaring at the villain, the number 3 hero tightened his hold on the villain. Wolfram laughed and flexed his pulsing muscles and snapped the fibers holding him in place. Gonna take more than that, poser, Wolfram taunted. The villain then created 10 massive cubes of steel and threw them at the hero below him. Fortunately for the stylish hero, the combined strength of Mariko, Izuku, and Chimera were enough to punch through the cubes, narrowly saving his life. This is what I get for complaining about not getting enough action. Mirko spat. Yeah, guess this is the storm after the calm. Chimera huffed. Seems so. Big guy, Mirko replied with a smirk. She looked towards Izuku. How you feelin', Mike Jr.? Think you can keep up and help take this guy down? Izuku's eyes darkened as he glared up at Wolfram. I'm fine. Right now I'm a little bit weaker than you, Senpai, but if I transform into my Kraken form I should be dozens of times stronger. The only problem with it is that I have problems stopping myself once I have a target in my sights. Mirko raised a brow. Her interest piqued. She gave him a nudge. Then consider my permission granted. Get a lock on that guy and get ready to kick his ass. You too, big guy. Bring out that monster muscle. Mirko pointed off to the distance where Hawks, Crust, and Wash were fighting Kirigiri. Genist, go help them out. Leave this guy to the brawlers. Reluctant but trusting her logic, Best Genist left to aid his other comrades. In the meantime, Deku's had become as black as ink and his muscles pulsed with power. This was his Nomu form perfected by the Hero Public Safety Commission. Chimera now stood at 10 feet in height, with muscle fibers covering his arms and legs. Mirko's face split into a wicked grin. All right, boys. Let's kick his ass. Deku was first to move. His enhanced strength gave him the ability to jump high enough to put him within swinging distance of Wolfram. The teen had moved so fast the villain barely had time to defend himself. Wolfram managed to capture the teenager in steel and attempted to crush the hero, but Izuku was strong enough to resist even with the villain's quirk enhanced. While Wolfram was preoccupied with Izuku, Mirko closed the distance. Using the bits of metal the villain levitated as platforms, she managed to land an axe kick that sent the villain plummeting to the ground. Where Chimera waited, the wolf villain turned anti-hero fired a condensed blast of energy at his shared enemy, which scored Wolfram's skin. Wolfram's rage bubbled to the surface and he called all the free metal he could to himself. In a burst of fury, Wolfram shot hundreds of steel spikes at Mirko and Chimera. Using her impressive dexterity, the rabbit heroine bobbed and weaved between as of the assault as possible. Eventually, the barrage became too much for her, and as she closed her eyes to welcome her end, a webbed hand pulled her near. It was Izuku. A translucent shell formed around his body, which he used to shield his senior hero. The two crash, hitting the ground hard in a plume of dust. Mirko moved with a groan. shaking the dust off her. She reached a hand down to Izuku. You okay, kid? Mirko paused and had to fight her instincts to stay near Izuku. It wasn't his face, his flaring gills, or his rows of jagged teeth. It was his look of murderous intent on his face that made her feel like she was in a volatile situation. She smacked. Get a hold of yourself. You're not done yet. Got it. She got through to him. Izuku nodded and took her hand. Good. Got any ideas? Izuku pointed at his head. His crown, Izuku said as he realized his altered Nomu voice had returned. It's making him stronger. 2 can short-circuit it if I can get closer with my siren quirk. Mirko smiled. Sounds good. Let's get you that opening, but first let's check on the big guy. As soon as Mirko said that, Chimera emerged from a pile of rubble and started firing off massive blasts of energy at Wolfram, who was guarding with shields made of steel. Okay, we're in luck. I'll back you up, might JR. But you gotta make it count. Yes, ma'am. A duo charged in the direction of their distracted opponent. At full speed, Deku took a deep breath in when they were finally noticed. Mirko cleared the way for her junior by punching and kicking away Wolfram's metal constructs. Before he knew what was happening, Izuku jumped from behind Mirko and took a hold of him and screamed with the force of a bomb. AHHH. The villain screamed in pain, but it was overpowered by Deku's own high-pitched wail. The quirk-enhancing device on Wolfram's head was fried, causing him to shrink without its power. Weakened and momentarily helpless, Mirko took advantage and threw a roundhouse kick at the villain's skull. Wolfram was sent flying through the air in time for Chimera to send one last high-intensity blast at him, shooting him out of the air. Trio had won just as the others had apprehended Kirigiri, however. Before they could celebrate, All for One sent them all flying with stomp of his massive feet. It wasn't as bad as the initial blast, but the wind had been taken from the sails of most. Exhausted and battered, Mirko lost consciousness with a smile on her face. Izuku put her on his back to evacuate her. Chimera, who witnessed this, swore silent revenge. Meanwhile, Mirio and Dabai were doing all that they could to stop All for One's rage-fueled rampage. Mirio managed to retrain the villain's arms using Black Whip, but try as he might, he was unable to stop the ancient villain's destruction. Adding to his worries was none other than Dabai. The flame villain took any shot he could at him, while also trying to take down All for One. Lemillion was locked in a 3-way deathmatch where he was the only one trying not to kill. Mirio cursed as All for One thrashed against the restraints created from his Black Whip quirk. Mirio was losing his grip, and to make matters worse, Dabai resurfaced and shot a bright stream of fire in his and All for One's direction. On reflex, Mirio turned intangible and sunk into the ground, while All for One retaliated with another world-shaking punch. What's wrong with you? Mirio yelled out at Taoya. I thought you wanted to make the world a safer place. All for One is killing good people with families and loved ones, while you keep trying to kill me. How selfish and stupid could you possibly be? Is this your justice? Mirio's rant was cut short as he was sent flying from the force of one of All for One's fists. Unbeknownst to Mirio, his words had stricken his shell-shocked rival to his core. After killing his father, Dabai wasn't the same, even though he hated him. Even after the suffering he'd caused him, a part of him bore regret. At first, it felt good to Dabai, seeing the shock on his father's face before he'd been frozen solid. But after he'd shatter, Dabai felt empty. He'd spent so much of his life trying to prove his father wrong that he'd lost touch with himself after killing Endeavor. He'd realized that in the end, that all he'd wanted was to prove that his existence was worth something. But in the end, all he'd done was rob himself of what he spent his life building towards. So here he was abandoning reason and wildly attacking the two that stood before him. Shut up, you hero trash. Taoya lashed out with streams of blue flames erupting from his palms. He tried to fry both All for One and Mirio to poor results. Mirio turned intangible and All for One walked through the flame unharmed. The hand of the giant took hold of the pyromancer and slowly began to crush him in his palm. Well, if it isn't the prodigal usurper. Seems you've found yourself in a bind. Here, let me help. Taoya howled in agony as his bones snapped and impaled his organs. His regeneration quirk was being overwhelmed, and his vision was turning black. Taoya Todoroki was dying at the hands of the man he promised himself he'd be better than. You thought you could replace me, that you could inherit my throne? I spit on the notion in audacity. Boy, you have no plans, nor vision to bring forth any meaningful changes. You've wasted an army, killed your father, and for what? Shallow revenge. Tamura might have been immature, but you lack any long-term goals. A selfish and utter waste of life is all you amounted to. Die. Dabai let out a pitched scream as he felt his insides and bones being crushed. He closing his eyes. But when all hope seemed lost, a yell snapped him out of his torment. Power, Mirio yelled out. crushing the massive jaw of All For One's new body with a Detroit smash powered up to 100%. The Titan staggered and lost balance for an instant, allowing the blonde hero to rescue Dabai. While the giant recovered, Mirio took the time to put as much space as possible between them and All For One. "What the hell? You rescued me." "Why?" Dabai asked while his body regenerated. "Because I can't take him down alone. And I'm tired of losing people to his rampage." Dabai spat out a clump of blood. "Yeah, I can respect that. But even with us working together, we can't take him down. He's been playing with us the entire time. Doesn't matter. If he wins, he'll kill everyone here and anyone else he feels like he has to get his message across. If you meant anything you said, you stand for. This is a fight you can't back out of." Dabai looked up at Mirio and for a moment saw All Might standing in the blonde's place. "There are worse ways to die. Might as well try out this thing I've been working on." Tower rose to his feet and dusted himself off. "Let's go." A horn grew from Dabai's forehead, while Mirio dialed one for All to 100%, making his bones rattle. "Huh, you're running out of steam too. Guess I'm not the only one." Mirio stole a glance of Dabai and noticed his body turning pale. "Seems like it. Try not to die out there," Mirio said as a trickle of sweat traveled down his forehead. "You too," Dabai said with honest respect for his rival. In the time they'd had this conversation, All For One tripled in size, rivaling that of a skyscraper, and covered himself in stone armor. Fear and anxiety took hold of the duo's hearts as they gave their all for their last stand. Dabai took the lead, launching himself in the air like a rocket. He circled around the massive villain, firing off balls of flame and ice. Unfortunately, all it did was annoy the giant. Lemillion managed to crack and chip away at the stone armor, but beyond that, no long-lasting damage. Mirio had always been optimistic, but even he felt a sense of hopelessness. Both he and Dabai were sent flying back, landing in nearby craters. The two looked up at each other and shared their despair. It seemed like all was lost until the giant stopped and started howling in pain. All For One scratched at his back in an attempt to shake the cause off, but his mass kept him from being able to reach. The stone armor began to peel off and he began to shrink. In all the villain thrashing, a figure became visible. Izuku Midoriya, in his Nomu form, had stabbed his arm into the center of All For One's back, filling the villain's body with venom. "Get off of me, you insect." All For One managed to grab the source of his pain. "You!" All For One boomed in righteous fury. His anger was cut short by Mirio's right hand. A full-powered smash stunned the man, causing his grip to loosen. Izuku escaped on his own while Mirio took full advantage and pounded away at the villain's face. Behind him, Dabai charged up a new super move. "Get out of the way if you don't want to die," Dabai warned, causing Deku and Mirio to run away. "Flash fire. Flames of Prometheus," Dabai yelled as white fire shot from both of his hands and engulfed All For One. What made these so dangerous wasn't the intense heat, but its fusion with Ares that caused them to burn and age their victim rapidly simultaneously. When the flames died down, a petrified skeleton was all that remained of the former ruler of the underworld. Dabai nearly collapsed from exhaustion. It had taken almost everything he had to pull that off. But it wasn't over just yet. "So, where do we go from here?" "You behind bars," Mirio answered from behind Dabai. "Can't let that happen now. But for what it's worth, you were right. I lost sight of what it was I wanted to do. We'll be meeting again." Dabai disappeared in a burst of purple smoke and reappeared next to Compress, who was holding a fistful of marbles. The masked man gave a curt bow and the two left together in a portal. Mirio sighed. It was over. They'd lost many lives, but for now no one else would be hurt. His predecessor, Deku, approached him in his normal form and smiled. "Mirio-senpai, we did it. Time to go home." It was a bittersweet victory for the heroes, but still a victory. Of all the people there, Izuku was amongst the most anxious. When they made it back to base, there were dozens of people waiting for them both. Uraraka was the first to give him a hug. It took her nearly 5 minutes to let go of her boyfriend. As she showered him with kisses, Deku's friends berated him, while simultaneously celebrating his return. Inko and All Might hung back and fought their tears. They were proud and happy he had returned to them one piece. Deku lived out the rest of his short life with his loved one, as a hero, husband, and father. In the end, he'd lived the life he'd always wanted, with the people he cared for, being the man ... and the hero he wanted to be. Outro. Thank you all for indulging yourselves to the end of this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, We have a third channel called We The Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We The Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We The Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interests by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, we're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So, thank you all for watching, and have a great day.